Hey guys, part of our assignment this week is to talk about plagiarism in the pulpit. And um, when it comes to plagiarism in the pulpit, there seems to be a growing concern that a lot of preachers and pastors are just finding different sermons on the internet. There's a wide variety of them that you can find. I mean, you can go in there and Google sermon over baptism, sermon over the Lord's Supper. You can find a sermon on just about anything and have it ready for you to use on Sunday morning or Wednesday whenever you do your service. And so plagiarism in the pulpit can be a really huge problem and is becoming a big problem. And so in order to address that, I looked at a couple articles on the web that talk about it, and one of them from churchleaders.com talked about a book by Scott Gibson called "Should We Use Someone Else's Sermon?" And in that book, as it would, obviously be about, it is about the plagiarism in the pulpit and how often it's used and how often people are plagiarizing and how awful it is to plagiarize, and how if you do get caught plagiarizing or you are plagiarizing in the pulpit, you should be taken down from your position. You should never preach again. You're a thief. You're stealing. You're just as bad as the murderers and all those other things listed in 1 Corinthians 6. And it just goes on talking about that. They do a real good job summarizing the book. I was able to catch a few pages of it. I found a sample online. He obviously did a lot of research about it, and it was a really good read. And also, there was another article I looked at from the Gospel Coalition, and they talked about D.A. Carson. And D.A. Carson spent time and did the same thing, was looking at things, talking about plagiarism in the pulpit. And some of the things that he said were a lot more vicious and cut more to the core. He said that when you plagiarize in the pulpit, that you are stealing, you're deceiving all those that you're preaching to, and that it's perhaps the worst thing you could do. You're not devoting yourself to the time to study the Bible, and you're not truly being the disciple you need to be if you're not putting together and putting in the effort to put together an original sermon and to give your own ideas. And I find that to be true to an extent. And the reason I say to an extent is because when it comes to preaching, there's no sermon that hasn't been taught. And the word plagiarism is, as you say, vaguely defined as you taking someone else's thoughts and ideas and passing them off as your own. And we see this most of the time in academics. That's usually where we see it. As college kids, they warn us and tell us about it all the time. You plagiarize, you're kicked out of school, you probably won't get back in school, all that stuff. And I feel like there's a very defined difference in between academic plagiarism and plagiarism in the pulpit. Now, they're similar in the fact that you're taking someone else's ideas and passing them off as your own when you don't cite it and when you don't give the person credit that they're due. But when it comes to academic plagiarism, you go and you find a paper that was written on discrimination in the 1940s or whatever, and you use it and pass it off for personal gain, to get a good grade, what have you. It's for your own personal gain. But when it comes to plagiarizing in the pulpit, yes, I guess you could say someone be doing it for their own gain, to sound smarter, to sound like they've done a lot of studying when someone else has done the studying. But if you take the time and really look at what the pastor is doing in the pulpit, what the preacher, whoever's teaching in front of you, whether they found an article online and are completely reading it word for word, whether they give it credit or not, the worst possible thing that can happen from that is someone hears the word of God. Someone hears what they need to hear. They hear the divinely inspired words of God. Now, am I saying this means no one needs to ever study the Bible again and just go find a sermon and preach it on Sunday? I'm not saying that at all. You need to do your studying. But as far as people like D.A. Carson and I just lost the name of the other person, Scott Gibson, they made it seem so evil that it was this horrible, awful thing to plagiarize someone else's sermon. And granted, if you're not giving someone the credit they deserve in the pulpit, then that's just bad as well. But going as far as to say plagiarizing is sinful, that you're stealing, that's a very gray area that I'm myself am not comfortable trying to say one side or the other. I feel like it's one of those places where, silent where the Bible's silent, something like that. It's a very gray area because when it all comes down to it, you're still preaching the word. You're still talking about God. You're still giving that word out to the masses, to the congregation. So it is no good to take someone else's ideas, but going as far as Carson said to stealing, it's sinful. I don't know if I'd be that far into saying that much. I myself have used other people's sermons to branch off, and I've actually had a friend that asked me to preach for him one Sunday, and it was a last-second thing. He wanted me to use his sermon, and I gave his sermon, and honestly, I didn't really give credit. In the beginning, I kind of joked about how he wasn't here and had to give me his sermon. But all in all, I'm probably going to ramble on too long. Plagiarism in the pulpit, it is becoming more apparent, but I don't believe it is a sin, as Carson and Gibson have said, that it's, all in all, it's going to be getting the Word of God out there, and that's our main goal as Christians, is to make sure we get the Word of God out there. Whether it's your own personal thoughts and studies, or if you're not able to understand or find anything, using someone else's. As long as we're still getting the Word of God out there, I think we're doing all right, and it's going to be okay, and we're going to make more disciples. God bless.